Hello and welcome to Inside News. I'm Dale Matthews and we're joined by Mike Jones. Hello, Mike.
Good evening, Dale.
Well, so last night's transmission was cut off. And so we gave you as much as we could, and then we had to stop. So we're picking it up. We're going to roll back just a little bit so that you know where we were. And then we're going to do some analysis of the story, obviously, about Simon Hare, Commissioner, and what's been happening with him. As you can see over my shoulder, there's the Daily Courier story, a day after us. And here's information and the mugshot of Simon Hare and the trouble he got into late last week. So the timeline on this is on Thursday morning, Simon was with the other two commissioners in the little back room on the important meeting of the week, and that's Thursday administration workshop. And he reminded them that he was going to be gone for the next couple of days at the Association of ONC Counties, and that he needed their proxies. The proxies that they give him as county commissioners, because he was the secretary treasurer of the Association of ONC Counties, which they say is important. We really don't know what kind of progress we've seen the last few years. It's hard to say what that progress is, hard to put your finger on it, but he really wanted to be the vice president of the Association of ONC Counties. Well, unfortunately for everybody, including doing his job, which he says, oh, my job's not been affected. Yeah, it's already been affected, because on Thursday night, that Thursday night before the Friday session at 11:06, Simon Hare was at the following location. And that is the Silver Dollar Strip Club in Eugene. This is just about the only picture of one of the girls who was dancing that night that I can possibly show you. There's a bunch more, but I would have to do multiple redactions to each picture. And as you can see, she's not wearing very much, but she's really the reason for the season. She is indicating that with the Santa hat.
Oh, gotcha. Yes.
Right.
Certainly.
She has also some Santa kind of leggings, but I'm not going to show you those. So let's say goodbye to this young lady. And instead we'll go over to, that's from the past. Instead we'll go over to where he was supposed to be on Monday, which was the Oregon Leadership Summit. As you can see, the governor was there. All the legislators are there. Everybody who's anybody in state politics was at the Oregon Leadership Summit on Monday. Simon Hare apparently was not there. He was signed up to be there. I've confirmed that, but they say he did not show. Well, where was he instead of here? Well, on Thursday night at 11 o'clock, a police officer was traveling westbound on West 11th Avenue in Eugene, and it was passing by the Silver Dollar Strip Club when a Toyota Tundra pickup, owned by Simon Hare, pulled out of the driveway there directly in front of the officer, and the officer had to slam on the brakes to avoid crashing into Simon Hare in his Tundra. The officer stopped the vehicle and contacted the driver. Hello, what do you think you're doing? Very bad timing. And he arrested Simon Gabriel Edward Hare, age 37, of Grants Pass, for DUI and reckless driving. At that time, what the police there said is that Simon Hare refused to take a field sobriety test. This is serious because implied consent says that you must agree to do such a thing. The Silver Dollar Strip Club on 11th is what they describe as a gentleman's club tucked behind a motorcycle shop. Right. So the police say what they did was they impounded Simon Hare's vehicle. They handcuffed him. They put him in the back of the police cruiser, and they drove him to the Lane County Jail. Couple of hours later, he was booked under the two charges: driving under the influence of intoxicants and reckless driving. He spent the night in jail. What this meant was that this important conference that he was supposed to be at the next day, where he had been nominated to be the vice president of the Association of ONC Counties, he could not attend because he was in jail. They elected him to that position as vice president anyway.
In absentia.
They did, yes.
Yeah.
So Simon Hare was then arraigned at 11 o'clock on Friday in front of Judge Karen Stinnard there in the jail. He was in charge, he was being controlled by Lane County Adult Corrections. And according to the court records, a representative from the law firm of Rasta and Connolly in Eugene, their criminal defense attorneys, was there with Mr. Hare at the time of his appearance. I talked to them and I said, I just want to confirm I'm not asking any secret information. I don't want you to divulge anything you're not supposed to. Were you there in the room? Did you represent him? And despite what the court records say, the Rasta and Connolly people said, we do not represent him. Interesting wording. And I said, oh, then the court documents must be wrong. And they said, correct, and then hung up on me.
And I guess, I mean, is that some kind of way that you end up defending your client by not giving any knowledge, even that you're working for him? Is that it's an odd strategy, but I guess that's what they're doing.
It's an odd strategy. That's right. Now, he stayed there in that facility until just before 3 o'clock on Friday, and then the police let him go and let him drive home. So now, according to the Leadership Summit, he didn't show up. Now, we don't know every fact. Somebody might be wrong somewhere, including the person that did the crime. He could possibly be wrong in the things that he's done. Hare issued a press release on Monday, which was carried in its entirety on KJO, indicating that he had decided to go into a treatment program that's going to make him all better. He didn't include that, and that one of the reasons he's required to do that is if you ever expect to drive again, you have to go into what they call a diversion program. My personal take is that having that be the lead sentence is a bit of a diversion in itself.
Sure.
Right. So now what I did was I contacted the Association of O&C Counties. Their motto is promises to keep. Okay. And I asked if Doug Bridenthal from Jackson County, who's run into his own problems over in our neighboring county, and Simon Hare here, would potentially have any kinds of problems with the Association of O&C Counties. And what they indicated to me was they would be having a meeting in the early part of January to decide what they're going to do, and they would invite Simon Hare up there to talk with them about everyone's plans. Well, one of the problems is the meeting that they had in the little back room today, the two commissioners, is they decided they would no longer let Simon Hare go anywhere in county vehicles, and they could not allow him to drive to county events in his own vehicle because he's on county business, as he was when he was up there.
Makes sense.
So they're going to provide for him a chauffeur at your expense.
Oh boy.
So that he gets to go to various meetings and etc., because he dips in and out of all kinds of meetings in the area. If they're in the courthouse, not a problem. And he can probably get dispensation to travel from his home to his workplace. The only problem with that is commissioners are always on call, or pretty much always on call, and many times they'll go directly from their home to their first meeting, which is maybe not in the courthouse.
So this chauffeur thing, this is just until they have the come to Jesus meeting and ask him to head on down the road. Isn't that right?
We don't know what their decisions are going to be, and that's what we're going to talk about on tonight's show. What are the decisions that can be made? What's the best strategy for Simon Hare? What's the best political strategy? What's the best personal strategy? What should the commissioners do? What should the citizens do? One of the things we do here is review media, and we also review the commissioners and what happens in politics, and we also analyze what the options are and where do we go from here. That's one of the things that we do. So if you just want to see the reports directly from the police, etc., now's the time to turn off the show because we're going to talk a little bit of analysis. Okay, you're welcome to stay, and we hope that you do. So, Mike, in a normal world, what do you think that Simon Hare should do next, sir?
Well, what he should do here's the problem is that there's almost this sort of an idea that he has something to do with his further employment with the county. And him making decisions about that has something to do with his further employment with the county. I personally think they really ought to have this come to Jesus meeting where, some of the county leaders, perhaps even some of the city people, you get together and say, listen, for the good of the county, city, whatever, going forward, maybe it would be better if you resigned. And then, of course, he could always buck that, and you could end up in court behind this thing. But I really think that that's the best thing. I don't think that this guy listen, we have seen enough of what has been out there for public consumption. There is almost certainly, listen, everybody who gets busted for DUI has done it 100 times before they get busted. Okay, so the idea that somehow this is the very first time that Simon has gotten behind the wheel, well, we know that's not true, but that this would be the first time that he's been behind the wheel and had a buzz going, that's just factually inaccurate. And we know for a fact that's not the case.
Right. We know that of the reasons, but by the way, some of you may have noticed that Mike's picture seems to be frozen. I don't know if it really is for you, but if it is, our apologies, and we do what we can. This is not our fault. So one of the...
Okay, I should be back now.
Oh, you are back now. Okay. So you may recall from 2 years ago, this seems to happen once a year with Simon so far that we know of. And 2 years ago, the Medford police concluded in their official report that Simon Hare had made a false police report about his stolen vehicle. You want to tell them the situation behind that, what had happened? Mike?
I don't know the specifics as well as Dale does because he wrote this story in that First Friday newspaper that you're seeing over his left shoulder there. But essentially, and just jump in any time if I'm wrong about any of this, Dale. He was basically shutting down the Wonderbur one night, and he decided to, even though he was hammered, to go get in his Jeep and drive home. And he never arrived. Well, he did arrive home, but not in his Jeep. And then he reported his Jeep had been stolen, and then it was discovered in somewhere nearby his house. And I guess he stumbled out of it and walked home. I'm speculating, of course, because no one knows for sure.
Well, somebody saw someone closely matching his description stumbling out of the vehicle. Right. And then the police later found nothing was broken into in the vehicle. It's a little bit odd. So if it was a stolen vehicle, that's just a little odd. Parked near his home, that's a little bit odd. His friends who were there with him said that he was sloppy drunk, hanging all over him, hugging him, kissing him, the guys, the girls, everybody. They were trying to encourage him not to drive home because he was too sloshed to do so. The upshot of the case was that the Grants Pass police investigated it. They didn't want anything to do with it, really. They handed it off to the Medford police, which is odd because it didn't involve Medford. They looked into it. They sent a detective over to his house to talk to him. You want to tell him what happened when the detective arrived at his house, Mike?
Yeah, I think he slammed the door in the guy's face and just basically refused to answer any of his questions.
He said, I'm a busy guy. I've got other things to do, which is a little bit of an odd response from someone that has a stolen vehicle. Yeah. My vehicle was stolen. I'm just too busy to talk about it. Right.
Yes.
So the DA at the time.
Well, perhaps he.
Go ahead.
Perhaps he sensed the tide was turning on the investigation there at that point.
I think that's a possibility. So there were a lot of people who said, well, take it to a grand jury. One of the things a grand jury does is it investigates things when there's enough evidence to make you say, hey, what's going on here? Of course, he's a local politician. And the DA at the time said, I am not going to pursue this. And I asked him, why would you not take this before a grand jury? Because, well, it's only about filing a false police report, which has big penalties, and it gets the police all involved in stuff when they should be out protecting the county from drunk drivers.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, why wouldn't you call a grand jury together who will then investigate this and look at all the facts? And the answer he gave me was, he's no longer the DA here, is that his department gets 20% of its funding from the county commissioners.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to. It doesn't in every other county, and not every other, in some other counties. And but somehow, even though we're hanging on by our fingernails, we keep paying the DA's office out of our money here.
Yeah,
Locally.
no, this is an interesting thing because, and we've talked about this before, that they get 80% of their funding from the state, but in other counties they get 100% of their funding from the state. Is that not true?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, so and I asked this question before, and I can't remember the answer to it. Is the 20% that they're paying 20% in addition to what normal counties get from the state, or are they just they're only making the state pay 80% and they fill in the other 20?
Good question. It's in addition.
Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, if other states, or I'm sorry, if other counties in the state are paying, are not paying, and the state is paying 100% of their budget, is there some reason why we have to add another 20%? Is the state only paying them a certain amount because they're in podunk GP here, or what?
Do you want the politically correct answer, or
No,
what?
give it to me straight, Dale.
It's a get out of jail free card.
Yeah, that's kind of what it seems like. But I was looking for the rationale that somehow maybe because it's a punishment to have to be working in Josephine County as opposed to some other more swanky place, that we pay them 20% because otherwise we wouldn't be able to get them to come here unless we did that.
Well, I did try to talk with the DA at the time, and he wouldn't talk to me at all. So when we got a new DA, I asked if I could go in and see him. No recording allowed. And he wanted to be there with somebody else, even though I showed up by myself. And they were pretty cold and hostile. And when I asked them this question, they had no good answers at all.
Well, certainly, probably somebody else could answer the question, but it does frame the thing in such a way that you would see it exactly how Dale has described it. That this could be a get out of jail free card. It could be designed specifically this way so that if the commissioners run into trouble, they have a trump card.
Or, well, based on tonight's the debate, maybe so. Listen, the point is that whether they intended it that way or not, isn't that the result?
Sure.
Now, you may notice that there's a little lag, little delays in this show. We're just all going to have to put up with it. That's the way that things go. So that was 2 years ago. Then, almost exactly a year ago, another event took place. I was contacted at least 5 times before this one fellow, Doug Deakins, contacted me. And he said, something really, really odd happened at a bar. Sounds familiar. And I would like to be able to say something and stand up. And I told him, I said, well, you're number 6. And so if you decide to, that's fine. If you don't decide to, fine. You need to decide what's best for you and your family. But we will be there at that meeting if you decide to stand up. And he did. And you want to describe what happened there, Mike, or shall I?
Well, he essentially described the situation. It was December 5th. This is an odd situation because that was December 5th of 2014. And this situation was December 10th, separated by a year and 5 days. Is December, at least in the past few years, not very good for Simon Hare. Anyway,
beware the Ides of December.
Yeah. Yes, right, exactly. this family was there. The husband and wife were there watching a band that was a friend of theirs. And Simon Hare was there drinking. They weren't there together. They didn't even know this guy. Simon Hare picked up his wife's phone and started going through the contact list and sending texts to people. And he sent texts to a couple of young girls. One was their daughter, and another one was a cousin. Niece. Yes, but a cousin to the whatever. Anyway,
their niece, and also there were no pictures on the phone. Doug Deakins. No pictures on the phone, according to Doug Deakins.
Yeah. So in other words, he's just going by the names in there, and he claims it was a prank. Who knows what it is, but it's certainly inappropriate to pick up somebody's cell phone and start texting people that are in the contact list. And I guess in a drunken stupor, you thought it was hilarious.
One of the texts said, "God, I got to get in your pants."
Yeah, and I think the other text was sexual in some way too, but
it was
a bizarre thing. And then
when Doug Deakins confronted him, the first thing that Simon Hare did was deny that anything had happened.
Yeah,
the second thing he did was to blame Doug Deakins and his wife for leaving their cell phone on their table.
Yes, you shouldn't have left your cell phone next to a sloppy drunk person. Yes, that's inappropriate.
Especially a county commissioner. And then the third thing he did was he warned them.
Yes,
that he's got lawyer friends and that they'll regret saying anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was all that it took for Doug Deakins. So he called me. And so I asked Doug later, now Simon Hare has said at a couple of meetings that everything's worked out and that you've forgiven him. And Doug hit the roof. No, absolutely not. That never happened. We haven't forgiven him. It's not over. And that there were actually a couple of people who blamed Doug Deakins, saying that he was a publicity seeker.
Yes. And listen, we're seeing the same sort of people occasionally when we have posted this story in Facebook. Facebook is a great way to aggregate news in such a small community like this, and we've been using it. And a number of people have got on there and they feel sorry for Simon Hare. Listen, I could understand feeling sorry for Simon Hare were this the first occurrence. This is not the first occurrence. It's like three major ones that we know of.
Well, some of the religious community, especially those who have been pushing for more property taxes, that's just odd. Well, what an odd place we live in. They've been backing Simon Hare all along, but this thing about the strip club puts it into a whole new perspective, because it looks as if he did not just wander in a drunken stupor into a strip club, that he walked in standing upright, which is a bit of a moral failing to some people, and he walked out staggering out, basically, would be, I guess, one way to describe it, though, I don't know, maybe by now he doesn't stagger. In such cases, he just almost kills a police officer. And so, because the guy had to brake aggressively to avoid running into him. Of course, we want to get the dash cam footage and the body cam footage. Of course we do. And that's like giving something away to the courier. Joe will say, what's that? Okay, but maybe the courier is watching this and they will realize, gee, shouldn't anybody ask for that? Yes, they should. So we'd like to see that. It'll take a couple of weeks if we're able to get it. So those are the three strikes. We know that the Courier today decided to do an article about this. And they also decided to do some kind of poll. Their polls are fake. We've proven that in the past. We've also done a poll, but our poll is not fake because you only are allowed to vote one time. We actually had a friend of our show that tried to call in and vote a second time and was not allowed to vote. That makes it a legitimate poll. It makes the Courier's poll fake because you can call and vote as many times as you want to, and that's not a survey. That's just, for entertainment purposes only. Mike, at this time, how many responses has the Courier had to their poll?
Well, I took it about a half an hour before we went on air here, and there was 11 responses in. and 90% of them are saying that Simon Harris should resign.
How many responses again, sir?
11.
Wow. Okay,
Yes.
11 responses. Now,
Yes.
we put out a poll last night.
Yeah.
We had to our more scientific poll.
The last I checked here, we had about 160 responses, and here are the questions. Does Simon Harris' apparent alcohol addiction and string of recent related incidents make him ineligible to represent the citizens of Josephine County? Strongly agree 81%, agree 7.5%, neutral 2%, disagree 1.8%, strongly disagree 6%. So you can see there, if you add the agree and strongly agree together there, you got 89%. So
sounds rather familiar, this 80.
Yeah.
20 thing, doesn't it? Is we're asked several to getting a bunch of people saying yes to one, but no to the other one, which is identical. Something's wrong with the poll.
Right. Okay. And then to the question, should Simon Harris resign? We have 85% strongly agree with that. 3 3/4% agree. So, I mean, together, basically there you got 90% there. Neutral, 3.7, almost 4%. Disagree, 2%. Strongly disagree, 5%. So, 7% of the people are strongly or just mildly opposed to Simon Harris resigning. If Simon Harris does not resign, should he be recalled? 80% strongly agree, 5% agree, neutral 6%, disagree 3%, strongly disagree about 7%. And that's basically about it.
Okay, so I see a growing number of people now that has come out. We put it out first, and then it was repeated by the Daily Courier that where he was when the policeman almost ran into him coming out of a strip joint, and that there are a number of people who have said, what's this about him saying that it's not affected his job? It's already affected his job. And now the county commissioners have decided that if he wants to go to meetings from now on, any meetings that have to do with the county, that they will provide under taxpayers' dollars a chauffeur and a vehicle for him.
So does that mean they're going to pick him up at home every morning and drive him to work?
Well, he may be able to get dispensation in order to go from his home to his workplace. But see, many times commissioners go from their home straight to their first meeting, which is not at the workplace. So it's an odd thing with commissioners that they're supposedly always working, although we found that's not the case. He travels a lot. Now the question is also, what happens if he wants to go to the next big deal where people are considering him to be a world leader, at least a state leader? Now that means that we would have to provide not only the chauffeur and the county vehicle, but pick up all his costs and keep the chauffeur at our expense in a hotel and pay for his expenses.
Now, is this guy going to have to be on call 24/7? Are they going to have 3 shifts of chauffeurs that have to remain at attention in case Simon wants to go to the store or something in the middle of the night? Or this is just, it's crazy.
Well, I think that you can be pretty sure that the folks from Public Works are not going to be chauffeuring him to the Silver Dollar Club.
Okay. This is enabling is what this is. And
it's costing us a bunch of money,
Right. Exactly.
He cannot do his job unless we provide him a chauffeur.
Yeah. So why are we doing that? Why can't we just all agree that it's better for Simon Harris to move along, and then he can concentrate on, spending time with his family or whatever politicians do when they retire in disgrace, and move on down the road, and let's get somebody else in there. Listen, I feel bad for Simon Hare. You know what? It's a bummer that he has this burden, and this is his cross to bear, but no one else has to bear that, and he is forcing us to bear it for him here, and that's wrong. He should retire. He should resign and get out of there. Listen, you know darn well that whatever's going to happen, if that's going to happen, it's not going to happen before the end of this year, because he needs to have the solid 5 years in so that he can retire from this position and get his PERS.
That's correct. Okay, so one of the things that we do on this show is that we laugh and joke about the news. And while we are somewhat lighthearted about disaster and everything, it's better just to keep your sanity. Too late. You notice that we're not, jumping up and down and clapping with glee, because this is not such a wonderful thing for the county. Also, we missed our representation at this important meeting. This guy was slated to be, the next up and comer. So I think one of the things that probably will happen, whether the other two commissioners sit down with him or not, I mean, they benefit if he's marginalized and they keep him. They benefit if he's marginalized and they keep him in office, because Cheryl Walker and Keith Eck made it very clear. They had an illegal quorum meeting with Mark Gatlin. I saw them and I called them on it. And I said, you were talking about county business with Mark Gatlin. Cheryl Walker explained at a weekly business session that wasn't county business. I heard what they were talking about. They were talking about how they would like Mark Gatlin to defeat Simon Hare to become the next county commissioner when he was running against the guy.
Okay, but okay. Let's say that he stays in there and they're benefiting from him being in a marginalized condition here. So does that mean that everything that Cheryl comes up with, that Simon is somehow obligated to be her yes man or something like that? I'm just,
No, it does. No, it doesn't mean that.
But there is an implication, because you saying that they could benefit from him being marginalized. If that's the case, yeah, okay. But here, let me just finish. If they're going to benefit from him being marginalized, then somehow we are not getting out of Simon Hare what we should be getting out of a commissioner. And that's right. He is being held in weakened condition for the benefit of the others. How is that a benefit to us?
That's a real good point. Okay, a couple of reasons it's good for them to marginalize him. Talking about strategy now, that's one of the things we do on this show. If they pull in somebody that they like, and they like Mark Gatlin, maybe Mark doesn't want to do it. He says that he can't be a city councilor anymore because he doesn't live in the city, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have other plans.
Find a way.
Yeah, so, but that has nothing to do with the city now. So the problem is, if they pull in somebody, even if they like him, you never really know, do you? Because we've seen this several times, what ideas he might come up with that would conflict with theirs. So if they have somebody that's weakened in a weakened state, it doesn't mean that Simon would vote with them. They don't need his vote. 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, right? But it does make some difference, because remember the plan that Simon came up with just the other day. It was just before this. It was the biggest bad thing that had happened since the kicking off the 2016 levy, which is the day before. His idea was, in order to make the individual commissioners look better. Go ahead.
I just think it's funny that that's where we're at right now. I mean, they seem to be outdoing themselves every day. They did, launch the levy the day before. Then the next day it's the PR thing. And then later that night, it's a drunk driving thing for Simon. It's only here.
A couple of days before that, two of the commissioners were left out of the process of doing a land use hearing thing, an appeal, because conflict of interest. That they were forced out of making any decisions. That's another scandal, right? And then just before that, they were denying that the state has found them guilty of any kinds of ethics violations, which of course the state has. They're guilty.
I had forgotten about that. How can you forget about that? That's like, That's like the big thing, and then this is just a cascade of bad stuff.
Bad county. Okay, so and we're causing it, as you know. Okay,
Right.
so
Yeah.
as bad as drunk driving is, and you could cost somebody their life, he could have cost a police officer his life. We warned everybody, okay, you're letting him skate this time, but it's going to happen again, and someone may die.
Right.
That's not exaggeration. Okay, so uh, the thing that affects us all before that, besides the levy and the rest of that, and not listening to us, is that the OGEC, the Oregon Ethics Commission, their penalties, potential penalties, are much worse than the potential penalties for drunk driving, not killing anybody, because these penalties would be that he loses his driver's license and we have to pay for a chauffeur for him.
Mm-hmm.
Butler, basically. Okay. Lovely. We're paying for that. The potential penalties, and this is what I want for Christmas, Mike, for the commissioners, is they could, if they threw the book at him, they could get 4 years in jail.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Yes.
But there's a bigger potential penalty for violating your oath of office. This is heavy stuff, buddy. And doing this stuff when you know that it's wrong, because what did Keith X say? What is the motto of these three commissioners?
Yes.
I know we're breaking the care.
Yes.
Well, see, when I supplied that to the OGEC, I think that had an effect on them. Now, giving the commissioners a letter of education is ridiculous. It's ludicrous. Because they say we do know what the rules are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Cheryl repeated that just today.
Oh, yeah. Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. In the meeting in the little back room. So they're talking with Wally Hicks about how they're going to carry this off with Simon, because they don't want the obligation, not the ethical obligation. Who cares about that, right? According to them. But that's not a quote. Okay. But they care about, could they be sued if Simon Hare is doing something like he was up in Eugene on behalf of the county, and then somebody gets injured or killed, right? And so they're saying we can't take that.
Whether or not they think they could do it, they certainly would do it.
Right. And so Wally Hicks was involved in this conversation, as well as the hired journalist that's going to write happy articles about them. And if they have to pay to get it into the Courier, they will pay for it. Advertising space if they have to. Their journalist, unlike us, will be, as Simon Harris said to me in the past, you are out of control. Yeah, I'm an out of control journalist. What does being in control journalist mean? Whose control are we talking about? So they will have a journalist at their beck and call who will be in control, tightly controlled messages. As Simon Hare says, we want to control the message. Interesting timing, Simon.
Yeah.
So it's a circumstance where Mike's right. This is speeding up. It's a good thing we have a daily show.
Yeah, it'd be hard to stay ahead of this stuff. And it's funny because we sort of waited a couple of days after Thursday when this meeting about the PR thing happened, and we were just talking about this a couple of days ago. So this is just like the snowball is rolling downhill and gaining mass quickly.
Well, the image consultant, they had a Portland image consultant that's explaining to them what to do. Well, you could see these guys are going to change. They're not going to come to Jesus. They're not going to do that. They're going to keep doing bad stuff. But if they have their own writer who's paid by them and controlled by them, and if they buy ad space, then all the bad articles in the world won't make any difference because they just buy a bigger ads, a whole page. Oh, Simon Hare is wonderful. And the same day that he said that, he goes out and he does this.
It's an amazing thing. I wonder if they're still going to go forth with this thing. You think they're going to go forward unchanged? You don't think they're going to change their strategy here? You don't think that they think that perhaps because listen, that video about the PR situation, creating the whole PR department, the propaganda department of Josephine County. That got a lot of views. A lot of
It
people
did.
saw
A
it.
lot of people they're outraged by that. But let me be clear that people understand. Cheryl Walker said, well, of course, we've got beautiful trees and wonderful rivers. This is not about trees and rivers. This is not the purpose of this. And Simon made it very clear. This is about getting positive publicity for the individual commissioners. You may recall watching that tape. Keith Eck said, well, will we get a chance to see what you put in? Simon says, I don't need to ask your permission. That's a nice attitude. I don't need to ask your permission when I'm putting in something about myself. Actually, it means someone else is writing it, and Keith Eck will put his name on the bottom.
Right.
It never occurs to these guys that that's dishonest.
Yeah, and then of course the payment for said propaganda department is coming from economic development funds, which they never seem to be able to spend on the sheriff, but they always seem to be spent on whatever else it is they'd like to do.
Her contention is that if you make the commissioners look good, then people will have faith in their individual commissioners. This isn't about writing something good about public works, the chauffeurs of Simon Hare. This isn't about writing something nice about parks. This is about writing something nice about the wonderful leadership capabilities of your elected officials. Interesting timing. It's just when the election season is heating up. We are essentially paying for their re-election campaigns.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly what's taking place. And there are
now,
one might think that would be a violation of ethics somehow.
Well, it would be, but nobody expects. It's like what used to happen with Herb Carter at these meetings of the fair board. Well, when I talked to the state, they said no one would expect that he'd turn on a loud radio and then whisper to his fellow board members so that you couldn't hear. There's no rule about that. And I said, there's also no rule about Herb Carter dancing around the room naked. Why would there be a rule about that? Who would do that kind of thing? And they kind of agreed, well, nobody would do that kind of thing. This was the guy, according to the commissioners, I don't know, but according to the commissioners, the auditors, oh, it's so good to have auditors, did not catch the fact that these guys were maintaining multiple hidden bank accounts that the county didn't know anything about. Herb Carter, according to the commissioners, was signing blank checks. Herb Carter, according to the commissioners, made that deal with Pepsi that ended up so disastrous without even consulting them. He made a private deal with them for the fairgrounds. Really? Now Herb Carter is over at Friends of the Fairgrounds, but they don't have to be answerable about the money that they raise and give over to, well, I think the new director wants them to be answerable, but I was there at the meeting when the first time that they gathered money in favor of, said, hey, we're representing the fair. And I said, how much are they giving you? Well, they're giving us, $5,000 or whatever it was. I said, great. What percentage of the money did they keep for themselves? Why? How dare you ask that question? Really? How dare I ask that question? Really? That was the fair board. They still have one of those people left. So that's why it's bad county, you see. But we can do something about this. There are solutions. So, Mike, let's suppose that Simon Hare decides he's going to be somewhat combative about this and that he's going to stay in office. What can he do? So let's suppose that, I wouldn't want this job. Let's suppose that you are their image consultant. How can Simon Hare best play this?
Well, listen, I've said it before, I think they could just start doing the opposite of everything that they have been doing. But, if you're going to be specific, they could take, the timber funds and the road dollars that were okay for them to spend on the sheriff's department, and they could immediately give that money to the sheriff and say, listen, we don't care about levies. What we care about is funding law enforcement, and by whatever means that we possibly can. And right now, the only means that we have is this money. And so because it's available to us, we're going to give it to the sheriff, case closed. And you immediately would have a several point rise in your poll numbers, I would think.
Right. People would stop thinking about this And you could just always paint it as, well, that was just a momentary lapse, even though it's not the first
Right.
time.
Well,
Okay, let me be the.
and
Go
listen,
ahead.
we've seen a lot of these situations in the past few months where it comes time to make a decision, and then there are several ways to go, and we're usually not in favor of going the same direction that the commissioners do. Occasionally, there are one or two of them that defect. In the last case, Simon Hare, we were in favor of what he wanted to do, and that is not fund this. The testing of the water in the river over a 5-year period for $500,000, and so that was a good
That's
thing.
money that
Now,
could
if
go
he
to the
keeps
sheriff.
making decisions like that, yes, and he said that, but and that's the screwy thing about that. He said that money could go to the sheriff, but as soon as they were done and weren't going to spend that money, he didn't make a motion to now take that money and spend it on the sheriff, did he?
Well, and the other weird thing is,
No,
if you're a
he didn't.
person that's in favor of law enforcement, why would you slam the door in the face of the detective who's come by to investigate your stolen vehicle? This story right here.
Yeah, but we know why that is. We know why that is.
Okay.
So,
All right. I'm going to be
I mean, everybody knows. You don't have to say it for them to know.
right. I'm going to be the image consultant, and I will try to use some of the arguments I've heard them say, and then you tell me why I'm full of beans, because I often am anyway. Okay.
Okay.
So sorry about the jumpiness of the show tonight, folks, but I think you can hear us clearly. I just at least hope so. All right, Mr. Hare, I'm the Portland image consultant. And obviously what you need to do is, honestly, now, if you're not going to change your ways, which you should do, but if you're not going to do that, the best thing to do is to ask the question, well, don't you realize this hasn't affected my job performance at all? You said that in a press release. Go with that. Lead with that. It hasn't affected your job performance.
Okay. I guess that I need to respond to that. And since I'm Simon Hare, I'm all for that.
No, now you're
Obviously.
the ethical journalist now. Try to be an ethical journalist for once. Now, why is that a bunch of beans? Hint: it's already affected his performance. It's already affected his performance.
I think, yeah, it already has affected his performance from an ethical journalist standpoint. Of course, if you're lying, an ethical journalist would say, stop lying,
Right. Right. Well, also, he said this is not going to cost you anything. It's not going to be bad for the county. This is a personal matter. It ends being a personal matter as soon as we're paying for you to have a chauffeur. It ends being a personal matter when you are not representing us at that meeting that we sent you to. Either one of the two meetings. It stops being this when you are marginalized as a representative. And who are you representing? There are certainly people in this county that he is accurately representing. I'm just not sure that those are the kind of people that would even realize that he's representing them by being this kind of person. All right, I'm going to try another one out on you, Mike. So commissioners, what you need to do is rally around your fellow commissioner and point out to people, who among you has not made one mistake? I mean, come on. Isn't everybody allowed a mistake, and to try to, at least one, and overcome that mistake? Where's your Christian sympathy?
Never mind that we're at, major incident 3. I'm all for second chances. He had that 2 times ago here. So, it's time to move on. I understand that they're going to play that card. That's what they have to play. But I'm certainly not in favor of that. I've been saying I think the guy should resign, and I understand that that's not what they're going to do. And they're going to have a different tack on it, and they're going to do exactly what you just said.
Okay, so there's going to be a weekly business session tomorrow morning at 9. There's supposed to be a bunch of people there who are protesting, again, the latest goofy thing of helicopters, super loud helicopters that may be damaging to your ears, flying over this bedroom community out in IV, right? And this is Cheryl's big plan. This is, and we don't know, but I assume, I think, I guess that they were invited in by Cheryl Walker and Larry Graves. Well, we can't turn them down. Well, you shouldn't have invited them in the first place. But and there are actually people out there. It's like a beaten wife. They're actually considering whether or not they think that it's a good idea to wear headphones, noise canceling headphones, every time the helicopters fly over. Really? Why are there helicopters in my bedroom? What are you guys doing? Do no harm, okay? But here's the advice I'm going to give to you, county commissioners, all three, as the Portland image consultant, because you need an image consultant. You don't need religious leadership. You need an image consultant because you're going to continue doing this kind of stuff and supporting someone that is not good for the county, and neither are you, okay? But if you're not going to reform your ways, at tomorrow's weekly business session, Simon Hare should not attend. And Commissioner Heck, who is still the chair, should say at the beginning, because Simon Hare is not here, we are not going to allow anybody to say anything on this subject because he's not here to defend himself, and the jury's still out anyway.
Well, and they have a history of saying exactly that. That if a person's not in the room, you can't criticize them, which is, of course, stupid. But Keith Heck was just saying that a few weeks ago, that he doesn't want, county employees being criticized by anybody, which is silly. Listen, if you're taking a job in public service, you're working for the public, and if the public has a criticism of you, that's I think that's their right.
Yeah, but they won't do this if they're imperial leaders who are hiring their own journalist because they can't get any journalist to write happy stories about them. They'll take out ads if they have to control the message. They want to control the message. There's a way to do that, but it's less direct than this. There's no way to do it if you're going to be honest, dishonest, and lie to us and be caught lying and say, I wasn't caught lying when you know that they've been caught. There's no way around that unless you change your behavior. They're not going to change their behavior. It's too late for all of them. It's too late even for this young guy. It's too late. They cannot change who they are. There's only one thing to do about this. I've used this analogy before. You come back from vacation. The power went out the first day that you were gone. You got 2 weeks of rotten vegetables in the refrigerator. Do you remove one of the vegetables and hope the best for the rest? No. You remove all of the vegetables, including J.J. Schofield, including the probably Wally Hicks, because he's enabling them on many of these things, and sitting in on the illegal meetings with them, sitting in on the illegal meetings with them, instead of protecting us as the elected legal counsel. And you've got, well, just name your poison. And so you say goodbye to all of them, you clean out the refrigerator, and you make a fresh start. In fact, you even put that, oh, that's for cats. Well, not fresh start, but whatever that is, baking soda, you put that in there. And then you go get some new vegetables.
Well, Dale, this tirade started out as advice for the commissioners about
sorry, I changed sides. Well, I seem like Wally Hicks. I changed sides.
Anyway,
okay, all right.
You're right about it.
Let me help control the image. One of the things they need to do is, I'll probably be first because they go from one side to the other side of the room. So either Keith Heck will suddenly forget which side was supposed to go first, or he'll start with me and he'll give me a lecture before I stand up. Because isn't everybody expecting me to say something about this? They're going to expect me to say something about him being a moral degenerate. I'm not going to say that. Why would I do that? You never say what they expect you're going to say. I'm not going to say that. I'll leave that up to other candidates for office. Hey, go ahead, pile on, boys. Kick them all that you want to, okay? I'm not going to do that. Why would I do that? There's plenty of things to talk about. Not that. We need a solution to this, not just dwelling in the past. This is the past. This is the past. Not the way that Cheryl Walker says it. Why, that happened a couple of days ago. And so what'd she say? Hearsay is something that happened a long time ago. That's what she said when I got up and I was telling him what this report said. You weren't there. You weren't there. Were you in the bar? No. Then you can't talk about it. I can't read from the police report. No, because you weren't there. That's journalism. No, it's not. It's slander. No, that's not slander. They like to redefine things. So they may decide that in the here's advice I would give you as a Portland image consultant that's dishonest. Declare that there's a lot of county business to be done, and therefore there will be no opportunity to talk about things that are best handled in executive session in the little back room. Next subject.
Okay.
Because all these things must now dive deep into the secret pool of completely legitimate executive sessions. Oh, wait, no, they're not completely legitimate. Well, at least secret enough so that we don't know what they're saying, and they no longer record any of their meetings, so they can't be subpoenaed by the state. Their executive sessions. Lovely, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and then do a very aggressive outreach effort to the Courier to give them lots of access to very interesting inside information about Cheryl and her family and Keith and his son, grandson, and how patriotic they are, and probably not talking so much to Simon Hare, but you need to have Simon appear at a lot of churches. Don't let him cry, but he should appeal to those who say that churches should not get involved in politics. Never mind the irony of that, and that start with the Parkway Christian Center with Dennis Weber, who said exactly that, and then became a city councilor. And you need to go to them and agree with them that only God can sort them out afterwards, and therefore let's all not cast the first stone. Argue with that, Mr. Jones.
I have no argument with that, Dale.
Right, right. So these are some of the tactics they could use. The whole idea of having a personal business chauffeur and county vehicles can be played, and that, well, you're sort of carpooling and commuting together, even though that driver normally wouldn't go to that. It is providing full employment for that driver, so J.J. Schofield will like that. And when you think about it, 4 eyes, even if 2 of them are half closed, are better than none. And it does give on-the-scene cross-training. Ooh, yeah, not cross-dressing, cross-training to the person from Public Works, who will get a chance to see some of the inside workings of county boards, where Simon must go and spend a couple of minutes and go to the next one. And this is all a very positive thing. Oh, include somebody from the Courier on your trip so they can talk together. That way, Simon won't be distracted from his driving, and then he can devote full attention to the new Courier writer, who will now get all of his undivided attention. Isn't that a wonderful place to be? There's a way to paint that as a positive thing. Now, Cheryl Walker is missing part of the point about being this drowned out by the ethics violations. She said, well, when we go to these meetings, we can just, Simon Hare can ride with me. And even Wally Hicks finally had to say to her, no, that's not a good thing. Well, why not? We're saving gasoline. She really did. And he said, no, because it could be perceived that you're talking about county business during the ride. Well, why would we do that? Just because that's all that we have in common doesn't mean, oh, we're business partners too. So what was it that their business partner, Kit Doyle, was saying on Facebook about how we should not criticize his own business partners in the hemp business, Mike?
Yeah, well, that's pretty transparent. He just wants to, yes, that's, you know, I mean, he's a business partner of Simon, so that's what that's about. I'll chalk it up to that and let him off the hook on the rest of the stuff.
Well, what we've done is we've gone on Facebook and we've posted the police report without comment. We posted the jail report without comment. We posted all of this stuff without comment. And there's still people saying the fact that you're posting it means that you're laughing at them. No, there's no laughing at this. I told Keith Hick today, I told the office staff, I said there might be some kind of rumor going around that people are laughing their head off. Mike and I are not doing that. That's why this story is a little bit more somber than usual. We do have some sense of humor left, but no, this is.
You know what? And listen, that's. I guess I'm not here. You know, and that's what Dale's doing. I'm not doing that. You know, there is something to laugh about in this. So you have to laugh because if you don't, you'll cry. You know, there are people joking about this. I've seen them on Facebook. They're saying all kinds of stuff about it. And you know what? I'm not going to be apologetic to anybody for that. You know, I'm not running for office, see, so I can do that sort of thing. You know, I don't care. I think this guy, this guy's a dirtbag, and he needs to go. And you know what? Anybody doesn't like that, I don't care. You know, and the idea that somehow nobody can veer from the proper path of speaking about this situation, and that you must be serious and somber. Give me a break. You're telling us how we should act. Why don't you look at this guy and tell him how he should act? That's my point.
Right. Well, let me be clear about something here. I'm doing that not because I'm running for office. We've had bad stories before, well before any of that stuff happened. And my tendency is that when there's something that's really bad like this, is to pull down a little bit on the laughing, this is just me, and concentrate just on the facts, because what's going to happen when you do that is, it's already happened, is even though you're putting out the police, when I went in front of the county commissioners, all I did was read from the police report. And they accused me of making stuff up and laughing about it and causing all, hey, this was well before any of this stuff that's happening today. Okay. That's what I did, because I know there's going to be plenty of people who are criticizing just for talking about something. Well, you should never talk about such things. That's where you and I are in complete agreement. What the heck are you trying to say to us? We should not talk about it? BS.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of BS, a couple more quick little things, and maybe something that'll occur to you too. It just occurred to me now. Apparently, one of our local citizens talked to Wally Hicks on Monday morning and told him about this, Wally Hicks. And apparently Wally had not heard about any of this, because the person had said, you know, how are things going with ONC? Well, they're looking better than ever. You know, Simon Harris is going to be the next vice president. Well, did you know that he spent the night in jail and never was able to make it to that meeting? And Wally Hicks said, oh, sugar, except that's not exactly what he said.
Yes.
Yeah, right. It's a no sugar time, buddy.
Well, and right, and there's a little honesty for you. Yeah, I wonder what he was working on that was so important that you know, we were almost going to have a breakthrough, because you know, if there was such a thing, let's switch horses and continue riding in that direction. You know, Simon's not going to be able to pull that off for us. Simon's not going to be able to go in there with a moral authority to direct a course of action and get us to somewhere that's going to be beneficial for Josephine County. Not going to happen.
Well, I think what has to happen is that some of these state leaders, and that includes Wally Hicks, because he's an elected legal counsel, but he was almost vice president of his party, his political party. And I think what's going to happen is they're going to sit down with Simon and they're going to say, all right, buddy, it's like somebody that's running for president and you don't want them to be president, but you say to him, why don't you run in 4 years? They're going to say to Simon here, I think, Simon, we're going to back you in a couple of years for a state position, because you'll be out of office by then. If you decide to stick in, we think you shouldn't. But if you can give it 2 years to kind of get your act straight, we will back you for that with everything that we have, you know, politicians' promises. But what we need you to do now is back out of this position, because we want Mark Gatlin, or we want Dan D. Young, or we want Roy Lindsay or somebody that's worse to be in this office to represent our political points of view, being rhinos, basically. And so why don't you just listen to reason? You're not going to listen to morality. You're not going to listen to Jesus. You're not going to listen to the citizens, but listen to us. We're telling you that if you want a political future in this state, you're going to have to back down and do the following things. We'll assign a political and image consultant to you to help you straighten this out. You're a young guy. There's plenty more things you can do. This is a blip on your radar, and he really didn't like being confined to Grants Pass anyway. Yeah. That's what I think it would be the best thing from their point of view. The best thing from the commissioner's point of view is to shut up and to try to get everybody else to shut up and hunker down, maybe stop doing some things for a while. That means that Cheryl wouldn't be very happy because her idea, well, you know, I know it's bad for everybody, but I've got an idea that's going to help us economically. Instead of one big tattoo like we had the last couple of times, I'm going to have 4 little tattoos. And just imagine how good that will be for the county. Tattoos do not help with economic development. Well, if we can't tax to each other into prosperity with one big levy, let's tax us into prosperity with 4 little levies. How out of touch can you possibly be with the community? Mike, you want to say in summary how out of community?
Not really. I think you just did it.
Okay, thank you for joining us, everybody. There are other stories in this world. But you know what? Do you have the feeling that the last shoe, 3 shoes, has not dropped on this story also? It's more and more amazing as each day goes by. Please come to the weekly business session tomorrow and tell them what you think. Thank you, everybody.